Taylor's in the building.
Already the show goes on all night till the morning. We dream so long. Anybody ever wonder when they would see the sun? Just remember when you come up. The show goes on. Alright, already the show goes on all night till the morning. We dream so long. Anybody ever wonder when they would see the sun? Just remember when you come up. The show goes on.
Have you ever had the feeling that you was being had? Don't that shit that make you mad? They treat you like a slave, put chains all on your soul and put whips up on your back. They be lying through they teeth, hope you slip up off your path. I don't switch up, I just laugh, put my kicks up on they desk, unaffected by...
Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the longest weekly running in studio All Bengals talk show. I'm your host, Malik, Wright. And welcome to another edition of State of the Jungle. I'm joined by my co-host. As always, we've got the best friend in the building, Danny Alameda. We've got Logan. We've got Evan McPhillips. And we've got a jam-packed show. Before we jump into anything Cincinnati Bengals related, I first and foremost want to send my thoughts and prayers on behalf of the crew, on behalf of the First Star Logistics family, to the people who were injured today during the unfortunate shooting in Kansas City at the Super Bowl parade. Anytime you have a situation like that taking place, it makes you stop and it makes you realize there are bigger things than obviously sports. That's life, right? So definitely my thoughts and prayers goes out to everyone who was involved, everyone who was affected. I hear law enforcement did a tremendous job to get things under control. But rivalry aside that we have with the Kansas City Chiefs, as much as I like to throw jabs at them on the show, definitely wouldn't feel right if I didn't start the show without mentioning our thoughts, our prayers, our well wishes, our regards are with the Kansas City Chiefs organization, the Kansas City community, and everyone who was affected close and afar to this unfortunate event. So I don't know if any of you guys have anything else that you guys want to touch on before we get into the show. Danny?
Yeah, I think the only thing that kind of really stuck out to just add on to you is there was a video that like some of the Good Samaritans actually helped out and actually, we're trying to like tackle the guy. So I just want to say, through all the trial, through all the bad things that happen, good people will always arise, and just see that video of people, bystanders actually helping out, that just shows, that there are good people, and that even in the worst times that something good can come of it. So that was something that I was like, wow, okay. Like it wasn't just law enforcement, it was actually the bystanders too. So prayers to everybody that was affected.
Absolutely. Before we jump into everything, make sure you guys give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and turn on post notifications if you haven't done so already. State of the Jungle, we are live each and every single Wednesday. Doesn't matter if it's a game, doesn't matter if it's the off season. We're going to help you guys navigate through this entire free agency process, this crazy, crazy time. The Bengals are in for one crazy offseason, and I'm looking forward to covering it. A couple of weeks, we'll be headed out to the NFL Combine. The boys will be joining me on Wednesday out there. We'll have to maybe hit up a little bit. What's that place called? They got in Indianapolis that has the jumbo shrimp.
Elmo's, is that
Elmo's,
right?
St. Elmo's, might hit up that place or something like that. Do something fun because it's not too often you get the boys in Indy, so it's gonna be a good time. A new segment that we introduced to the show last week was Player Spotlight, where we like to talk about a specific player, detail the pros and cons, and just talk about their overall fit as we see next year. Maybe it's on the team, maybe it's off the team. This week's Player Spotlight is a person that I personally am, hold near and dear to me. He was one of the first people who showed me love when I first came to Cincinnati. Had the opportunity to cover his camp. He was gracious with his time with me, and always has been. In every interaction him and I've ever had has always been positive. I'm a little bit slow to judge and be angered towards him, obviously, but that's Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon is a guy who I consider to be the most consistent offensive weapon the Bengals had this offseason. People might not like to hear that, and I understand because he has that $8.6 million tag to his name this year. People are looking at him as an obvious trade or cut candidate. Hear me out for a second before we really dive into the player spotlight, because I'm sure the man with the stats, Evan McPhillips, has them all queued up, and he probably has a lot he wants to say regarding this. I'll say this. there's what you do on the field and there's what you do off the field in terms of a locker room presence, a team enforcer. And I think Joe Mixon has embodied being a team player. He has been with the Bengals for the highest of highs and for the lowest of lows. And one thing that has remained when it comes to a guy in Joe Mixon is he's passionate. He cares. He wants to see a championship brought to the city. And that's something that you can't deny. I won't understand for the life of me why a player, I can understand if he played poorly this season. I can understand if he was just completely downright bad and it was like, let's move on. But I can't understand for the life of me why we're so quick to want to move on from a guy that showed that he still had more tread left on the tires this season. And especially when we don't necessarily have an answer at the running back position for a guy that's ready to take over the responsibilities fully. I think Joe Mixon, man, I think Joe Mixon can be in for another strong year for the Bengals. I'd like to see him and Chase Brown continue that tandem and see what they could accomplish. But speaking more to the man that is a Energizer Bunny man. So speaking more to that guy, I think Joe Mixon has a lot more left to give to the Bengals football team. That is just my thoughts. That's just my thoughts. And last thing I say is it's not in the Bengals' MO, right? To just move on from a player. And we talked about it a little bit last week. It's because of the way that they structure their contracts as to why they just don't move off of guys right away. And maybe they hold on to players too long. I have no idea. And Natty Ron, you asked the question, yeah, but will the Bengals bring Mixon back? I want him back, to be real. Yeah, he's still under contract. There's no not bringing him back. He's under contract for the Bengals. I would personally be shocked. I could be wrong. I would be shocked. I would be absolutely flabbergasted, right? Let's use that word. If the Bengals were to cut Joe Mixon. If you were going to move on from Joe Mixon, the time seemed like it was last offseason, right? You don't repay the work that he did this year in the city by just moving on from him, especially this year. He really showed a lot of promise. I expect Joe Mixon to be back fully. That's not to say this wouldn't be his last year here in Cincinnati, but I do think that he gets brought back. So with that being said, let's open up the conversation. Let's open up the dialogue. This week's player spotlight, Joe Main Man Mixon. So Daniel Alameda, let's hear what you got to say.
Yeah, the running back position is honestly one of my favorites, whether it's scouting in the draft or whether it's just watching in the NFL in general. How I look at this, Joe Mixon, I believe he can have a very good season this upcoming year. You look at how the entire offense is structured. You look at the end of the season when the Bengals finally started to get the run game going. Joe Mixon can have a very productive season. I think his ceiling this year, he could look like a top 15 back easily with the 1-2 punch with him and Chase Brown. Looking towards the future, though, right? I mean, just focusing on this year, first off, Joe Mixon will be back. As Malik said, the time, if you were going to cut him, would have been last year. With everything that was going on, with all the turmoil, with, the spot that the Bengals were in, you didn't pay Joe Burrow yet, you didn't pay Jamar Chase. That would have been the time, but they didn't cut him last year. He's got one more year left on his deal. It would be completely against what the Bengals do to cut him this year. So looking forward to the future, though, I do think that the Bengals can bring in another running back in the draft to potentially work in for the future. But looking at Joe Mixon once again this year, I think he can have a very productive year. I just want to see them balance Mixon and Chase Brown. I think a 60-40, 75-25 split is definitely the way to go. But Joe Mixon can have a very productive season this year. The offensive line still 4 returning starters. And I still saw a lot of juice in Joe Mixon. Look at the 49ers game. Look at the last couple games of the year. Mixon and Chase Brown have the potential to be a very good running back tandem this year.
Yeah, I think when you really look at Joe, the thing that, Malik kind of alluded to it, the thing you like is you know what you're going to get. And, some people might not necessarily like that, but at the end of the day, knowing what you're going to get goes a long way. We know he's going to be an above average running back in the pass game, an average runner with, good downhill. You're not going to get those crazy long runs, these explosive gains, these missed tackles. And, that's okay as long as you know that and as long as you can expect that. And I think for a while, that's where that conversation kind of started of wanting to cut him last year because we weren't getting that. And yes, he looked a little better this year, but the key thing for him is what Daniel just alluded to is the combination of him and Brown. When you're not going to get those chunk explosive runs with Mixon, let's wrinkle in some Chase Brown because now he is capable of that stuff. You just got to start using players to their strengths more. And I think that Joe still has plenty of strengths in the NFL, plenty of them, plenty of them, plenty of them. But there's going to be some areas of the game where Chase Brown is better than him, and that is perfectly fine. You just have to continue to find that balance of using both of them because, again, there's no point to use players if you're not going to use them to your advantage. There's no point to have arguably one of the faster running backs in the league in Chase Brown if you're not going to use them. So just continuing to use both of those guys to their strengths, and Joe Mixon especially, is going to help his stats look better and just honestly just help the offense look better in general too.
Yeah, I think the context of the situation is really important when you're talking about why there was a lot of conversation around potentially cutting Mixon last year. And part of that was the large cap hit. You were talking about do 10 or so million dollars and $12.5 million cap hit. Now, after the restructure, that's down to a $2.2 million base salary this year and $8.5 million or so in cap. But the cash is down to like $5.5 million that you're paying him. So like the money, like you said, is a lot more palatable. Part of the problem is if you're getting paid like a top 3, top 5 guy, but you haven't necessarily produced that, which, like, again, Mixon is good. Mixon is a good running back. This is not to say that he's some bum who doesn't deserve in the league and shouldn't be on the team or anything. That was never the conversation. The conversation was, if you're paying a guy like Christian McCaffrey, shouldn't he be able to break tackles or create yards outside? And I know the offensive lines weren't great, but neither was the one in Carolina, right? Like, there's other ways you can produce outside of that. And again, this is not to slander Mixon or anything. This is just to add context to the situation. So now the cap number is more palatable, and also supply and demand, right? What were the free agents who were available last year? Kareem Hunt, Devin Singletary, Miles Sanders, Ezekiel Elliott, Austin Eckler was looking for a new destination because the Chargers didn't want to give him a contract. Dalvin Cook was available.
All those people are free agents again, by the way.
All those guys who are free agents, and then you look at the draft, and you had Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Charbonnet, Devin Achane, Ty J. Spears, Tank Bigsby, Dwayne McBride, Roshan Johnson. I mean, you had so many different running backs, Kendre Miller, like coming out in the draft that you could get in the mid rounds that you felt comfortable could handle a big load as a rookie for you. So it's like you had all these alternative options. You had in free agency, you had all these alternative options in the draft. And to borrow from like an economics term, is very elastic, right? Like you have a lot of options there, a lot of substitutes that you can replace it with. Whereas like this season, I don't think, looking at what you owe him, looking at the cash spent on him, I don't think you're paying for that top 5 running back. And certainly you're not getting that, but you are, like you said, still getting a consistent, reliable, good running back who's not going to fumble the ball, who can offer you good production as a receiver in space, which I think is a place that they can really utilize him. But I think what really helps him too, man, and to be fair to Mixon, like he shouldn't be handling 80-90% of the touches out there, like especially through the first 6-8 weeks. Like that will wear you down. You're not going to last in an NFL season as a 23-year-old, let alone as a 28-year-old running back dealing with that. So I think adding in Chase Brown, like I think you saw a little bit of a faster Mixon down the stretch because he had those chances to kind of get those breathers on the sideline. And then you saw him bouncing some more outside and kind of getting the edge where sometimes he might not have before because he's had 20 carries by the third quarter. So like, that's where I kind of see is you're not relying on him, right? So you're not paying him as a top 5 back. The draft is not nearly as strong as it was last year. So the alternative replacements that you have that you feel good about are not necessarily there. So you might as well at this point, with how you've structured it, with the little guarantees, with the cash that you have allocated, I don't see that there's a clear move on from him and replace him with X, right? Whereas last year you could say, hey, we have any number of these veterans of the Kareem Hunts out there that we can, and sure, there's like an AJ Dillon or so this free agent cycle, but like, I don't think there's just this huge bevy of options plus the financial burden. And I think that's why Mixon still like is middle of the pack in terms of yards per attempt. Guys, I know his total yards are high, right? But what do we know about total yards? If you throw the most passes, you're likely to have the most passing yards, right? When you run the ball the most times, you're more like, it doesn't mean you were necessarily the best, right? So that's why we got to be careful and add more context when we're using like from scrimmage numbers, total numbers. There needs to be a little bit of like the per attempt efficiency because that matters. It does. But still, like that's not to say he hasn't been a solid running back, a average NFL running back in terms of everything. And he's been top of the marks in terms of ball security. So depending on what you value, I feel like all the value financially with what you have available, like I think it makes sense to keep him on the team with Chase Brown, now that you can do that, and sure, that maybe that should be a 60-40 split, right? Keep both of them fresh, help them out, develop Chase Brown, see what more he can handle. And also, you just saw the dynamic element that added to them last year,
Right.
man. So like, I don't think it's fair to say that just, Joe Mixon should be cut. I understand that there's a way to alleviate the cap number there a little bit. But he took his restructure. They worked out with Trey Hendrickson. Maybe they work on a restructure with someone else, like a Sam Hubbard, or I feel like BJ Hill is adequately paid for being an interior defender. But yeah, I'm looking at the alternatives, like you said, with Miles Murphy, Joseph Osai, and I'm like, man, Sam Hubbard is a really good run stopper, and we're getting to the end, and again, like Sam, good player, big play from the fumble in the jungle, right? Like that's awesome, that's fun, we love it, we love the feelings and the nostalgia about it, but we can also be real about what we can expect in the future of the next year or two. And
I want to address something real quick.
Address it, Malik.
It's been a while since you used one of your big words on the show.
One of my big words.
I don't know.
Do I need to whip one out later? And okay, I'll find a way.
No, I'm not gonna respond to that. But I will say this. So Simone's in the comment section, and she said, "Dibs on Evan for next year's Valentine's Day." That's love right there.
I
did try to.
I did not tell her that you called me today and tried to
say it again. Who's a good
Malik
show
Malik
host
tried to call me today and say, hey, I'll give you the day off. And I said, no, I got that dog in me.
So Simone, I tried.
If we had real date plans tonight, I definitely would have. I'm not that big
Simone,
of an
he
asshole.
said this, he said it's your fault. But no, in all seriousness, we've got 80 plus people in the chat. I'm proud that you guys chose me to be your Valentine, because what are you doing, right? You decided to spend time with me and the boys. State of the Jungle Crew, presented by First Star Legends. I'm appreciative of it. You guys are my Valentines as well. But let's talk more about the Mixon thing. Listen, I think that Mixon showed a lot of patience, I would say, this year, especially dealing with everything that he was dealing with, especially with the simple fact that there were games in which we were like, run the damn ball. And he's numbers, to Evan's point, Evan's talked about how, he got a lot of carries this year and stuff like that. But I feel like his numbers could have been a lot better, especially when you're going up against teams that
it's the elusive rating, man. And that's just a way to kind of boil down like missed tackles forced, right? Because a lot of the really good running backs end up if you look at the top 5 year over year, right? So you end up around like an elusive rating of like 60, 70. The really good ones like Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, Christian McCaffrey, whether you're breaking tackles by literally breaking the tackle attempt or eluding the tackle, there's different ways to do that. But usually you're around 60, 70, 80. Mixon has consistently every year been at like 30, 35. And it's weird because he's so strong and he's so quick. And part of that, of course, is not getting the opportunity in space or against second level defenders. But even when he does get those opportunities, it feels like he always just gets shoestring tackled, right, by the DB or just brought down by guys that, right. And when was there's just not that many big runs with Mixon. So when it happens, it's like, oh man, wow. And again, part of that is offensive line not getting to the second level, but I want to be fair, but he's not an elusive back.
Right.
And that's kind of been what holds him back, right? From being that upper echelon, top 5, top 7 back, is creating yards outside of the design.
Right.
And that's always been the key aspect of it, is he's just not an elusive back.
No. And, obviously he's getting up there in age. So it's only going to decrease, if anything, at this point.
But again, not to say he doesn't have value,
right.
but it's going to be much more of you're the middle of the pack kind of NFL back, as opposed to.
I feel like there's a lot of like people just like picking on him and pointing him out. Chris Smith, everything you're saying in the comment section is absolutely right. But we also deal with the world. I know you watch the show quite often, brother, and we appreciate your support. But on this show, there's reality, and then there is Bengal Dome reality. And how the Bengals operate is drastically different from how everyone else operates. So if you're looking for a show to blow smoke or to tell you something that you want to hear, it's probably not the show, because we're always going to try to deal in reality of how the Bengals do business. And there's a lot of reasons to point to why I don't believe Joe Mixon will be cut, but I think the biggest one is it comes down to, again, we've talked about the way that they structure their contracts and why that holds such prominence when it comes to, hey, just move on from a guy. It's just not that simple, man. It's not, even though everything you're saying is right, we've been saying it. Joe Goodberry, my good friend, has been saying it. Get younger at the running back position, get a running back with juice on it. How crazy would it be to have like an Isaiah Pacheco type of running back and those Bengals?
Again, force some missed tackles by physical running style. That's kind of what you would expect from Mixon too. Like that's what you'd think it would, because man, that guy's strong. It's just weird.
And again, it's just one of those things. And agree, JC Kirk said it best. And JC, I appreciate you always being here, man. He says Mike Brown also loves Joe Mixon.
Yep.
Don't think he completely move on. I mean, Mike Brown and the Bengals, I would say they're a very loyal organization, sometimes to a fault to players. Right? We saw them stick by players. Not going to name any names, but we've seen them stick by players who were absolute menaces in the community, sometimes to a fault. And it's just one of those things. It's just how they do things. I mean, there is an understanding sometimes when they do sign some of these players that, hey, you might sign for a fragment of what you probably can make on the open market, but at the end of the day, we won't cut you. We're gonna view you like family. And would the Bengals be better off if they operated less like a family business and more like an actual business?
Mm-hmm.
I'll leave that up for the debate. Because I do believe that there is a spot in which both of those can work. Especially in a sport such as the NFL.
You got to really walk that line, though.
Yeah,
you do, and you're going to have to teeter either way in one instance or another and be comfortable with that. But I think the flip side to what you're saying too is like you want to get younger and explosive, right?
Yeah.
And that's good to say.
Yeah.
And last draft, I would have absolutely agreed, but this one, former NFL draft lead analyst for PFF, Mike Renner, was saying that he only had like 3 guys rated higher than Chase Brown for this NFL draft for the running backs coming out. So unless you plan on spending one of your first 3 round picks at running back, which I don't think anybody wants to, I think trenches are a big need. I think there's a lot of other needs.
You and me, we keep
we're lined up on this one, man. It's
know?
going to be an interesting draft season. But I mean, when you look at the free agents too, right? Do you feel like AJ Dillon or Zach Moss are going to be more elusive, are going to like force more missed tackles than Joe Mixon?
AJ Dillon's my guy. I'm a little,
AJ Dillon, one, got the fumble problem, and 2, he ain't forcing missed tackles.
No. I'm not talking. You didn't even let me finish, bro.
No,
AJ Dillon's
I'm gonna let you finish. Look, but AJ Dillon, no.
AJ Dillon's my guy in Madden. He is.
No, I get that. He's a great Madden.
He's a bruiser.
The same way that Tyrod Taylor used to be that quarterback cheat code when you did the fantasy draft, so you could just wait.
He was.
Oh yeah, you could just wait until like the last couple of rounds, get him, and then just run like 4 vert scrambles and just a little quick. I'm getting off topic. Anyways,
no, you're
the
right.
other running backs.
That's why people love the show.
Is you're not paying for Saquon Barkley, you're not paying for Josh Jacobs, you're not paying for Derrick Henry, right? You're not paying for Tony Pollard. You're probably not paying a 28, 29-year-old Austin Eckler with all these injuries. DeAndre Swift is kind of a mixed bag. So, like, again, these are the guys who are available, and I'm not seeing a guy besides, like, Devin Singletary, if you buy his outlier season or he leaves the Texans where they just gave him the starting role over Pierce. I don't know why he would leave with what they got going on there, and I think they'd probably want to bring him back. But, like, he's the only one who I'd be like, yeah, if you want to buy into 1 year and pray that he continues that production. But I don't see anybody else who I'm like, oh, they force a lot of missed tackles. They create a lot of yards. They should have that. I feel like Mixon's a good compliment.
Side note, I just want to say this for all you people out there, because I know people, if you follow me, you probably are better. I just wanted to throw this out there. Just one little quick caveat. And I probably should have said this earlier today. There's a reason why I didn't put out a betting video today, because today, if you're planning to bet in the NBA, this is not the day to do it. You've got stars all around the league sitting out. You got late game notices of people saying this player's not playing because the All-Star break is taking place this weekend. Why a fun game is more important than actual wins, I will never understand for the life of me. I don't even understand the fact that the All-Star break is dead smack in the middle of the season. We'll leave it anyway. Don't bet today on the NBA, respectfully. And if you are betting, bet on people that coming off the bench. Just my thoughts. Daniel?
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. All-Star breaks in a couple days, so I feel like that'll
I've been getting a lot of like weird messages about that. Like, who should I bet on today? Who should I bet on? I'm like, listen, man, it's playing with fire. Like, these guys are, the Nuggets just announced their entire team is out today.
That's why I've started like with all the blowouts, I've been starting to look at a lot of unders for bench players too. If you're looking at overs, bench players. If you got a large spread game like that, like overs for the bench players are just unders in general, man. Like
Natty Ron, what are you talking about?
Unders a new way to go.
Said the NBA is not that good. Stop it. Stop it, man. That is crazy.
He's talking to the wrong crowd.
Wrong crowd.
He ain't gonna
Wrong
get
crowd. No legs there. No legs there.
I was
Oh,
gonna say
gosh,
Logan's
anybody would
your one lone hope, and I don't even
No.
know. Yeah,
No, I'm with y'all.
yeah,
Okay, running backs. Sorry, I was lost.
yeah.
man.
No, we got all.
I'll be
we
honest.
got the Madden.
We're
and
talking about
NBA,
NBA.
He's
yeah.
gone, man.
No, real quick, running backs. I'm
Yeah.
with you. When you look at somebody like a Singletary, that's like Chase Brown, and that's like.
But this was the one year that he was really productive and really
agree.
made people miss. And that makes me go, well, I mean, again, are you taking a chance to pay money to a 26, 27-year-old running back? Maybe.
Yeah, and that's
Maybe.
where if I'm the Bengals, honestly, and I know what you said about the draft, that's where I would be looking, if anything, and you would be looking at a running back that's not, because I truly believe Chase Brown could be the Bengals' explosive type running back for the next 3-4 years. I think he's that good. Not the number one, but the number two, the guy, the third down back. I think Chase Brown can be that good, but I want
Need a
somebody
little thunder for that lightning, baby.
completely. And that's where I want somebody in the draft. There are some guys later, like, round 3, round 4 that you can get. But yeah, you're looking at somebody, none of these, people are talking about like
Blake
Jalen.
Corum, that's going in the second or third round, guys. Like, you're gonna have to pay up for that.
And respectfully, Blake Corum, Jalen Wright, all these guys, these are undersized guys that you're not going to rely on them in the goal line. That's what you're looking for the Bengals, right? You want thunder. You want a 6'5", 5'11", 220-pound running back, somebody that can work inside the tackles. And if you're Bengals fans, that's what you guys got to be looking for, not, somebody like a Chase Brown, because I think Chase Brown's the lightning. You got to find the thunder.
Well, I think, the whole running back discussion, who you want to add, what round you want to add, and what kind of free agency you want to add, is also going to be very dependent on how they want the offense to be structured. If the offense is going to be structured how we saw it down the end of the year with Jake Browning, a lot more under center, then yeah, you can go after these bigger backs. You can go after A.J. Dillon. You can go after Braylon Allen in the draft. You can go after all these bigger backs. But if you're going to go back to the shotgun stuff, you don't want these big, heavy backs in shotgun, because that's just going to limit their game more and more. So I think, maybe it's just they go the hard committee route. We're going to give Joe Mixon a big back, Chase Brown. All three of them have their roles. Or do we want one guy that can just do a little bit of everything? You know what I mean? So I think finding that identity on offense is going, once you find that, it's going to be a little bit more obvious of who you want in your backfield. Do you want to pair somebody with Chase Brown? Do you want to pair somebody better with Mixon? Do you just want a guy who can do it all? Are you going to go hard committee? You're going to go hard workhorse? Whatever it is, I think once they find out how they want this offense to be structured, the personnel and everything will become more clear as time goes on.
And I think the Bengals would be they should go after somebody that you can have, not just in shotgun, but somebody under center, because that's what's kind of been missing. And I feel like if they go under center, you need somebody who's a big back, and you're going to need somebody on the goal line. So if I'm the Bengals, I am looking the next couple of years. If obviously they're not bringing Joe Mixon back in a couple of years, you need somebody that's going to take over.
That's a good point too, because I think that kind of gets lost in the shuffle a little bit with the running back discussion, is how bad the Bengals have kind of been in those like short yardage situations where if you took out Joe Burrow's like QB sneaks on the 4th and 1, like I bet they're like
atrocious.
I bet their conversion rate on like 3rd and 2 or 4th and 2 and short is like, especially on the goal line. How many times do we see Mixon just use like a battering ram and just getting stopped at the goal line? Again, this is not like bashing Mixon. There are a lot of different parts and pieces of this that lead to a bad goal line offense, but we talk about all the time guys who have noses for the end zone, right? Like that is a real thing, is being able to find that space, be able to find that gap, and just have that kind of that sense for when that space is going to open up and when to penetrate that gap and when to like really apply force or hesitate, do what you got to do to make sure that you get in the end zone. Some people just have that feel. And I think you have a good point. Like in the same way you try and get a diverse skill set in the running back rooms, especially in the NFL lately, like that's definitely something that would appeal to me as a compliment to Chase Brown, if you had that kind of goal line back type deal.
Yeah, man. I think, listen, I think we'll obviously, as the offseason continues to unfold, we'll figure out more things. It's starting to enter into that, it's time for me to put out the GIF where I put the LeBron smoke thing that I do every offseason, because the offseason is finally opening up. I'm ready for it. I'm pumped up for it, man. I'm kind of ready to get back on the saddle a little bit. I miss breaking news, man. It's been quite some time. And if I don't speak, it's typically because I don't hear much, but I'm really looking forward to get back to it. We're getting a question that's non-Bengals related before we continue the topic into how to fix the Bengals defense this year. But it came from Landon Van Steen. Landon, appreciate you, my guy. He says, "What NBA teams do you guys support?" I am a huge, monumental Boston Celtics fan. Daniel is a Boston Celtics fan.
That's crazy. You said huge for you.
No, he's a bigger Boston Celtic.
No,
He's
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm joking.
Then there's Dan. Then
I'm
there's
joking.
Daniel.
Then there's
with you, bro.
here's a guy. Have a good.
I'm
No,
messing with you,
Daniel's a
bro.
big Boston Celtics fan as well. Evan is a Miami Heat fan.
Yes, sir.
Hear
Heat
that?
culture, baby.
Well, rivalry.
Logan, I actually don't know what team you
I don't
support.
really
Paces, baby.
No,
We're
no. I don't really
Pacers.
have like a team I support. I just like to watch and enjoy basketball. I mean, I don't want to say bandwagony, but I've been watching a lot of Spurs games lately
Yeah.
just because of
Oh, here we
Wemby and
go.
stuff. But I mean, I don't really have a team that I support and follow. It's a fun thing to keep up with. There's always a lot of movement in free
Yep.
agency. Trades are always so much fun in that sport. So I kind of just enjoy it. And it's the one sport I don't really have a team to root for, like the Bengals, like the Reds. So I kind of just like to enjoy it all a little bit instead of getting hooked on to
So you're not a
another.
Cleveland Cavaliers fan.
No.
I mean, I really wish, I was talking to a good friend of mine the other day, and he says to me, Cincinnati is not a basketball city. I don't think Cincinnati would ever embrace an NBA team, man.
If Cincy had an NBA
I
team,
disagree.
They had an NBA.
If we had
team.
They're the
anything,
Kings.
Obviously, that didn't work out because there's a whole bunch of reasons for ABA and NBA realignment and all that stuff that happened that moved the Lakers from Minnesota onto the West Coast, and a whole bunch of other weird shiftings like the Jazz going from New Orleans to Utah and a whole bunch of other stuff. But I never liked that. That bothers me. Like the
I'm just
Jazz
telling
in
you,
Utah. was
Cincinnati
weird,
is one of
but
the most underrated sports cities in America.
you got UC and Xavier basically get like that kind of NBA passionate
Yeah.
following, and they're constantly ranked in the top
could you imagine
25.
if the Cavaliers were in Cincinnati, like how electric it would be? Like
Yeah.
it would be absolutely nuts. And it's because Cincinnati, again, it's a desired sports city. It's
Well, people said it wasn't a soccer city, and look at how Cincinnati's been doing.
Yeah.
Like they've been selling out.
Yeah, man. I just keep thinking if Cincinnati had this is coming from a guy growing up. I used to have season tickets to the New Jersey Nets back when we were in Jersey, and Jason Kidd was my favorite player. And got to see Vince Carter and all those guys play numerous times, man. I miss having a basketball team next to me. But you know what? I love to cover sports, and I'm glad that I'm in this industry to be able to cover sports on a regular basis because I kind of get my fix a little bit. Maybe I'll get to see my Celtics beat up the Pacers sometime, or I'll watch another team versus the Pacers. But to answer your question a little bit more, Landon, while I am a Boston Celtics fan, I am a huge Luka Doncic guy, and I am a fan of LeBron James. I think that he is phenomenal, and as you probably can see by my tweets, I have him as my GOAT. Don't let this poster behind you fool you. He's my GOAT. Let's move on to how to fix the Bengals defense. Back on track. How to fix the Bengals defense. Now, the Bengals defense had a lot of issues this year. And I think the biggest issue that went unnoticed, and this has been told to me, I will tell you, is communication. The communication aspect on the defense side of the ball was bad this year. And there's a big reason to point to why that is. I will not do that because I don't believe in bullying. But I will tell you this. People need to get better at their job. People need to understand and learn the playbook. And if, who said it best? Just do your job. Bill Belichick. Was that Bill Belichick that said do your job, or Tom Brady? Somebody
I'm sure they both said it.
They both
Yeah.
said it probably. But I know
That's
recently,
definitely a Belichick.
I know recently LeBron said it
Do
where
your
he
job.
said, just do your damn job. And I think this has to be the exact same thing. Do your job. The rest will take care of itself. And part of doing your job is knowing the playbook in and out, especially if you're a communicator. I'll leave it at that. But I think that the Bengals defense should take a step forward this year. I will tell you this as well. I would not rule out the possibility. of the Bengals signing a veteran safety this offseason. Not saying for sure that's going to happen, but I'll just leave it at that. Daniel, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think when I looked at this defense, I'll list off a couple things. The number one thing when I saw was the edge rush position. Third downs, QBs outrunning your edge rushers, getting outside of the pocket. That needs to be fixed. Whether it's your edge rushers, linebackers, that's the number one. And in my opinion, this is what we talked about on the other show. Miles Murphy is going to be a huge key because he's going to get a lot of reps this year. So the edge rusher position, interior defensive line, you've got to get more of a push. You've got to get more of a pass rush. And when I look at it, the Bengals defense does really well when they have these specialized guys, whether it's a Mike Hilton off the blitz, whether it was a Trey Flowers, covering the tight ends. That's what I want to see really, really, emphasize this season is, hey, whether it's a Mike Hilton, whether you bring in a guy in the draft to play those specialized roles, whether you have, somebody one-on-one with the tight end like a Travis Kelce. That's where Lou is at his best, is scheming against your best player. And that's how I really think this team is going to get to, where they want to be. You got the talent on the team. The safeties are young. The secondary is young. It's going to be, honestly, a pass rush. So I look at that as the number one thing, is a pass rush solves most issues on a defense.
Yeah, I think pass rush is obviously the area everybody's going to go, because even if we were good at it, you always want it to be better. You want the best pass rush in the league. It makes a world of a difference. But the area I think I'm going to keep hammering this offseason is just the linebackers, man. And I cut them some slack for this past year. The D-line was real bad. The safeties were real bad. You're trying to make up for the D-line. You're trying to make up for the safeties. So you get stuck. You get stuck quite often. And we know they both are very capable. Logan Wilson's shown plenty of flashes. Pratt has done the same. But you also have to admit they were bad last year. And it, again, could have been for a number of reasons. But if they don't, take a step forward, if the D-line struggles or if the D-line gets improved and they still struggle, we don't really have anybody waiting in the wings to take over them either. They're both freshly extended. They were both supposed to be key pieces of the defense. And when you kind of see them take a step back, it's just okay, now we got to keep our eyes on them. And, if we fix our other holes and they continue to take a step back, then, oh crap, now we have a bigger issue, which is your linebacker position, which in the AFC North is a very important position too, with the smash mouth football. So I think, again, they get a little bit of a pass for the year because there was so much going on. There's so much they needed to try to make up for. But for this, specifically the 2024 season, I'm going to be all over the linebackers and just looking out if they continue to, take a step backward, or if they're going to get back to their good ways.
And get some depth in the linebacker position. So,
yeah, honestly, I definitely think remember that video game Need for Speed?
Yeah, definitely.
Most wanted, baby.
Yeah, I definitely think there is a need for speed at the linebacker spot. You see what I did there? But I listen, I think that there is going to be opportunities to upgrade the defense. And I think that when we look at both sides of the football, you can sort of point out what the areas of focus are for the offense. Tight end. No, fan. It wouldn't be a show if I didn't say that, right? But tight end position, you need to figure out the right tackle position. Sure. Those would be the areas. Can you add another running back at some point? Sure. Can you figure out the slot wide receiver position? Sure. Right?
Nothing super intimate.
Yeah, you know what I mean? When I look at it, I think this defense needs more legs. You need more legs on this defense. You need more help on the edge rushing department, because guess what? If you have a pass rush, you are able to wreck a quarterback's life. And guess what? You need that in the postseason. You need guys that are going to be able to get towards the quarterback. The 49ers pass rush was so good in the Super Bowl, but the problem was the offense had hit a wall, and they weren't taking advantage of the opportunities, the extra possessions that the defense was getting them. They weren't taking advantage of that. But the defensive line for the Niners was fantastic. Chase Young made himself some money. Yes. I will say that in the Super Bowl. He made himself some money, man. He balled out in the biggest spot when the biggest lights were on him, because guess what? Nobody was watching Commanders games. Just respectfully, nobody was watching Commanders games. People were watching the Niners games, but he was sort of weird, right? He was trying to get adjusted. He was a midseason trade. But in the biggest spot, the biggest game, he played great. So
Kinlaw did as well.
Kinlaw played great. And while I'm watching that game, I'm like this. I'm like, man, can you just not play that great in that spot? Hopefully maybe something could shake this way. But it to me, I look at it. I put out a video, guys, and I just want to get your opinion on it. I talked about it, and I said, to me, what the Super Bowl had taught me was, if you want to win, number one, you need a transcendent talent at the quarterback position to win the Super Bowl. That's one. The next thing that the Super Bowl taught me was you need a pass rush, right? Because pass rush is king in this league. And if you're able to, or not even just maybe you need to be able to generate pressure somehow. Spags did a phenomenal job. And when you have a guy like Chris Jones, before you guys say it, no, Bengals fans, no. It ain't happening. But before, if you have a guy like Chris Jones, right, who is able to generate pressure, and forget Chris Jones for a minute. If you're able to generate pressure on a quarterback, it makes the world of difference. He was an absolute game wrecker. Can the Bengals find themselves in a spot in which they can add game wreckers, right, to the equation to make life easier for them, right, and rush the passer? I mean, to rush the quarterback on a consistent basis, because that's an area of focus that I think they need to look at in the offseason. I could point to a couple of things that went weird for the Niners in the Super Bowl. I did not get the lack of usage of a guy like George Kittle. To me, when you have a prominent tight end like that, you got to make use of him.
How about Brandon Ayuk?
Yeah.
The guy who got you there while
Yeah.
Debo was hurt, the guy who was a top 5, top 10 receiver by almost every metric that you look at, the guy who was the best against man coverage, which the Chiefs played a lot of man coverage, and he didn't go toward the weapon that was averaging over 3 yards per route run against man coverage per route.
Well,
I mean,
Kansas and his corners were doing a hell of a job. I'll cut the IU slack there a little bit because their corners are good, but I don't get the Kittle stuff at all.
And that's
I don't
the,
get the Kittle stuff.
That's the biggest thing that I look at. But I want you guys to go back and watch that game. I went back and I watched that game already, and I'll tell you this: there were many a plays, like any football game, but there were many a plays, and it gets a little bit highlighted, especially in the biggest game, in which you had guys open. You did have guys open, but you couldn't get off of that one read. That brings me to the Bengals, right? Just keeping it with the Bengals. I feel like the pass rush of the Bengals hasn't been necessarily the biggest strength probably since the Super Bowl run year. And when I look at what they had that year, I'll tell you what they had. They had a guy in Larry Ogunjobi who was able to who was being spelled at times by B.J. Hill. And on pass rush downs, you had DJ Reader come off the field. You had B.J. Hill, Larry Ogunjobi on the field, and you had those guys rushing the passer. When you have interior pressure, it makes the world of difference for edge rushers. It could make the most average edge rusher look good, to be quite completely honest with you, because then you get more one-on-one matchups, and maybe that tackle is overlooking you, and maybe he feels like he needs to slide over a little bit more to help that guard because he's scared of the interior play. I don't know if you can go out and find the production, because I think Larry Ogunjobi is a damn good football player who I feel like for whatever reason doesn't get a lot of praise. He's been consistent everywhere he's been. He's been with the Browns. He was consistent. Steelers consistent. Bengals consistent.
I think it's just because he hasn't found a home,
right?
For whatever reason too.
And for me, I look at a guy and I say, hey, B.J. Hill is still a guy that I think can help the Bengals defensive line. He's a guy that I'm happy isn't Cincinnati.
Should be in the rotation.
100%.
Shouldn't be the guy.
100%. Some Natty Ron asked, can Larry come back? I'll say this. I think bridges were burned a little bit there. I think feelings were hurt. And I think, when he thought he could get a bigger contract, and obviously we saw what happened with the Bears. Bears took that contract back, and then he wanted to come back to the Bengals, and the Bengals had gave his contract that they offered him to B.J. Hill. He felt some kind of way. And then he said, you know what? Screw you. I'm going to go sign with your rival. And, I think that kind of ship has sailed. But forgive me if I'm wrong. I definitely think there are some potential interior presence that will be free agents this year that could help the defensive line. And I think that's what the Bengals need more so than anything. I think that edge rusher is obviously a spot. I want a guy. I want a dude, okay? I want a guy that can dominate regardless of whoever his interior help is. We don't have that necessarily. Trey Anderson's a dog. And
that gap penetration, though, man, especially in the run game, like getting those negative runs, forcing that, like just from the start of the play, blowing that shit up, that's really valuable.
Right. And for me, that's what I look at, man. And I say, if you're able to get help on the interior, what would Myles Murphy look like with help? What would I can't believe I'm about to say this. What would Joseph Osai look like with help? Would he look better?
Why don't you say Sam Hubbard?
What would Trey
Hendrickson look like? Hubbard?
I think Sam Hubbard will get back to his 8 sacks a year.
There we go.
There we go. Need that. Great. Elite. No, but in all seriousness, no jokes aside, Sam Hubbard is one of the best, run stoppers in the league.
Fantastic guy, one of the best run stoppers. Like
You
Got to
I-
say all of this to
Mhm.
make sure that we can say, like, the pass rush is not
Bro,
there.
he's literally one of the few people that is up here and then down here, and it's
Right.
really
It's crazy. I mean,
unbelievable.
it is almost nose tackle level
it's
differences
crazy.
between the
It's
effectiveness of the
unreal.
run versus the effectiveness of the pass rush. And that's like,
Mhm.
again, even the sacks that do come are a lot of kind of high motor situations, or just something from Trey gets flushed out toward him, or the play just goes for a little bit longer, and then the coverage kind of helps out in that bit.
Mhm.
Again, this is not trying to take away from Sam. This is just trying to be
What
like,
you want.
hey, if you're looking at a spot to get more juice from in the pass rush on those obvious passing downs, he either needs to kick inside or someone else needs to come on the field.
Yeah, and that kind of just brought to mind, I guess, just help me remember. Like the Bengals have done such a good job the last 2 off seasons at adding athletes in the secondary.
Mhm.
They need to start doing it
In
on
the trenches?
line, and linebackers,
On the
like,
offensive
They
line,
just need to do it everywhere.
Yeah.
The secondary has gone from unathletic to one of the most athletic groups in the league these
Mhm.
last few years, and that needs to be a theme throughout the whole roster.
Yeah.
Keep them coming. Keep
I
them coming.
agree. And when you look at that, man, I'm gonna pose a question to you guys. And shout out my guy Lucky Luciano, man. He's in studio watching the State of the Jungle live from us. He won the last giveaway we did for a chance to have dinner with Dave Webb and myself. He was awesome, man, to sit down and talk with, man. And it's awesome to have you in studio watching the show with us too. I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. I'll say this. The question I want to pose to you guys is, obviously the Bengals are all in on this year.
Yeah.
All in as much as they can be their way. How much further would you push it if you were the Bengals? How much further would you go to try to bring a championship to Cincinnati? You figure you're obviously getting Joe Burrow back. You're getting T. Higgins back on the fold. What are some moves you guys would make? And when I say this, I want you guys to think very, very carefully. I'm asking the people in the comment section, but I'm also asking my crew here. What are some moves you guys would make to help make sure that you increase your championship chances? Because my mind instantly shoots to the defense, obviously.
Mhm.
What are some moves you would do to try to help with that? Would you go out there and make a trade? Hassan Reddick has been absolutely disrespected by the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Philadelphia Eagles leaked to, their, the guys that they go to, essentially, hey, we don't really want to bring him back for whatever reason. Let's say that we went out there and let him seek a trade. Would you go out there and inquire about a Hassan Reddick? Would you go out there and try to get these cast-offs from teams that maybe haven't lived up to the hype? Would you sign those guys that have that first-round pedigree and they have the one word that I hate, the intangibles? What would you do to try to see how you can maximize this championship window? What would you do? What are some moves you would make? I'm very curious because I know what I would do.
Yeah.
But what I would do, a little bit different. I'm sure what do I always say, Daniel? If I say what I want to do, I might get in trouble. So with that being said, I've been starting with Daniel a lot, so I'm going to start with Logan.
Yeah, man, it's kind of tough. I'm not going to try to give out too many specific names because I think there's just so many different ways you can go about it.
Mhm.
But I mean, I have to be somewhere on the defensive side of the football because I feel like that's the one side that we haven't really seen them go all in. We've seen them bring in people on offense, try different things, linemen, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe even bring in two, like whether it's you get a good nose tackle or you bring in another edge rusher, or you go splurge on a defense tackle and a pretty above average safety as well. Just because, like we said, we know Trey's good and we know we have some good young corners and some promising guys, but you don't got anybody the rest of the league is really scared of. You don't have anybody that you have to truly game plan for. You don't have, anybody that is just gonna, like we just saw on Sunday, necessarily truly take over games and go win you games time and time again. That doesn't mean we don't have plenty of damn good players because we do. But life gets so much easier for all those other players when you have one or two guys also taking the attention off of them. And I think for me, I would look somewhere in the interior because the interior pass rush is just something that is growing and growing and growing and growing. And it would help, obviously, all the guys we just mentioned. It's obviously going to help Trey Hendrickson too. It's going to help the linebackers hopefully play better. And there, I bring up the whole safety position too, because there's some really good safeties out here too. You can go pay one of these top-notch safeties a shorter deal, high money, and let them mentor Dax and let Dax kind of come in, be the Swiss Army knife. Or, same thing, let Jordan Battle. You can get more creative. Once you can get more creative and you have these other studs around you, to go just simply win their matchups one-on-one, not only are you going to confuse the offenses by having a creative defense, but you still know you have your studs to rely on. So I think that's a good balance on the defensive side of things. And I think if you take that approach, maybe this is only if you take that approach where you spend a couple, you spend top dollar on one or two, probably two free agents. Maybe then you try to move back in the draft. You try to just accumulate many picks so you can fix your depth, so you don't still
That's
have
interesting. I did
those
not
things.
expect you to say
So,
that.
well, I'm a sucker for draft picks in general. I just love the draft. So obviously I'm like, oh yeah, I love as many picks as we can get. But I think it's a good balance of like going all in by paying the top dollar, but you still have several swings in the draft. And the Bengals are in a good spot at 18. Don't get me wrong, but there's still plenty of talent in the areas that they're going to need. And if they're going to spend money on a defensive tackle, okay, now that eliminates a need at 19. If they're going to go spend top dollar on a whatever, that eliminates that need at 18. Now we just need quality depth. We need quality, good players around. I just think that's a good way to balance, like kind of going all in and free agency while still maintaining like the proper idea of team development with having, multiple picks to fill out your depth, to still have your high upside guys. Because people are going to want to trade in this draft. It's a good draft. Who knows where the quarterbacks are going to go? I just kind of like that balance of being aggressive in free agency, but still maintaining and filling out your roster with several draft picks.
Daniel.
Yeah, I think just to start it out, everybody's expecting the draft to be the spot where you do make the big move. I don't think you should expect, and the reason why I say that is who knows if a cornerback falls, right? Like Terran Arnold, and that's not a splash pick. Or who knows if an interior offensive lineman they pick, like a Jackson Powers Johnson, that's not a guy who's going to step and be like, yeah, he's changing the organization. But those are picks. But those are picks that you can probably expect that the Bengals are going to look at. So when I look at what they can do, number one, I think a tight end on the offensive position. If you add a good tight end like a Fant, like a Gesicki, I look at the offense right now, franchise tag T. Higgins, that's a Super Bowl caliber offense with Joe Burrow healthy. So now you flip to the other side. I think the only real spot that you can add a splash that would be huge is defensive line. And I would go interior defensive line. So if I'm looking at the Bengals and if I was in the front office and if I'm going all in this year to win a Super Bowl, I'm adding to that pass rush and I'm adding a tight end, because then I can say the offense with Joe Burrow, I'm confident that is a Super Bowl caliber offense. And the defense, you're getting pass rush, whether it's a Wilkins, whether you trade for somebody. I can see that guy in the Super Bowl making big time plays with Trey Hendrickson. And that's a start for me saying that's Super Bowl team.
I'm going to echo a lot of the sentiments that you guys said. And I'm going to largely say that you need a blue chip player. And that doesn't mean that you need to pay $30 million a year for Chris Jones. It means you can pay $23 million a year for Justin Matabuke, for Christian Wilkins. Like Logan said, that's going to help draw some attention away from Trey. It's hard to game plan. Like, you can game plan away from an edge a little bit. It's hard to game plan away from an interior guy who's just at the heart of everything, right? So if you got both of them to worry about, that helps other guys shine. That's going to help shore up things in the run game, help the linebackers maybe trust what's in front of them a little bit. And I expect a bounce back here from them as well. Maybe another year for another step forward for the year for a lot of, like Daniel said, young guys in the secondary. It was Dax Hill's first year, guys. Like, that was year one of actually playing that safety position. And he looked good in covering tight ends and being around the line. And so that doesn't mean he's a bust, just maybe the role that people had projected for him, like Hassan Reddick early in his career. He just been miscast from where the true strength of his game lies, right? You got Jordan Battle's going to be coming forward a little bit, and I think can become a guy who eventually wears the green dot on the defense, right? And can be that guy like Jesse Bates, like Von Bell, and help everybody get lined up and be on their P's and Q's and make sure they understand the ins and outs of the coverages that they're playing. I think all that helps the health of overall the defense. But man, you just bringing it back to the NBA, right? Well, how much gravity does a guy like Steph Curry have to a defense? How much gravity did a guy like adding Tyreek Hill add to the offense for the Dolphins? How much gravity and terror and enforcement did Roquan Smith, the addition to the Ravens? That made Patrick Queen turn from one of the worst linebackers in the NFL to suddenly I don't have to
Mhm.
worry about shit,
Yep.
but be athletic and go play and just do exactly what I'm specialized to do.
Even help the development of Kyle Hamilton. The
Right.
same way.
And so that's the thing is like one of these blue chip guys can just make everything so much easier on everyone else. And it can start a chain reaction. Like we said, you trust things in front of you more as a linebacker. Now you can play a little bit more in coverage, maybe trust a little bit more, maybe get cleaner lanes when you're trying to penetrate versus the run or the pass. There's a lot of different ways that you're helping yourself by doing that. So, and obviously getting pressure on the quarterback faster is going to help the secondary too. Secondary who is very young, very fast, and very aggressive that can allow them to play under things or take more chances at things because they trust that their D line is going to get home by the time that something develops even longer, right? So I definitely think a blue chip player in the trenches on defense would just do wonders for the entirety of the defense.
I agree with you. I agree with everything that you guys said. I'm gonna get a little more deep. Thanks, Logan. I'm gonna get a little more detailed, man, if I can for a second. I think one of the first things that I would do is a little bit. If we're talking about free agency, I would place a phone call, and I place that phone call to Micah Hyde, who is going to be a free agent for the Buffalo Bills. He's older. I would ask him about his level of interest about playing for the Cincinnati Bengals and with Joe Burrow. He's not going to probably cost a lot. He's projected to make around $3.7 million. Now, obviously, this projection, I would see what his level of interest would be to come to Cincinnati on a one-year deal. That's one move that I would make. You guys also probably can tell what the next move I would make at tight end. I don't feel like I need to say it. Noah Fant. That's a move that I would definitely make. I would call up Christian Wilkins' agent, and I would try to figure out what it might take to land a player of that magnitude. Because I think when we talk about those franchise cornerstone pieces, I feel like Christian Wilkinson checks the box. And I think he checks the box in a big way. He's young still, to a degree, 28 years old, right?
Young enough.
Young enough. I would also have a backup plan in place, obviously, if that didn't work out. The backup plan would look like a Javon Kinlaw, who I do know the Bengals did like when he was coming out of the draft. Don't know if these are things that are realistic. I don't see Chris Jones be an option on the table. I have a hard time seeing Chris Jones leaving Kansas City. And even so, I have a harder time seeing Chris Jones coming to Cincinnati.
Yeah.
And when you couple in the fact with his injuries and everything else he's been dealing with,
It's about to be 30. You're going to have to give him a 3 or 4 year deal, $30 million a year. And if you don't want to pay T 25, like I don't understand how you want to pay 30-year-old Chris Jones $30 million a year for the next 4 years.
Exactly.
When you can get a Justin Matabuke or a Christian Wilkins for 23, like you're getting almost the same production for a 30% discount.
Yeah, I think another name that I haven't really got too much into. I know we've talked about him a few times, but Big Cat, Leonard Williams.
Leonard Williams,
like,
Sheldon Rankins.
We just haven't talked about Leonard Williams much.
Right.
I think he's kind of that, one of the few that kind of is pretty solid in both the pass and the rush. I think, when you're kind of decent at both, sometimes people look over you because like, you're not dominant here, you're not dominant there. But I mean, that's kind of just a guy the Bengals need. Like if there's a world where you retain DJ Reader and bring in Leonard Williams, like that could be huge. I think there's several other low key names, but again,
if you're not like,
I don't want to keep looking at low key names,
but then you go, hey, we got Leonard Williams and we got Sheldon Rankins.
Yeah,
like I'm like, hell yeah, that interior's in a good spot.
I think whatever you do with the defense, that you need to double up.
Yeah,
you need to double up.
Either sign a big name guy and then draft one in the second or the third round to help out with that, and then have BJ Hill still in the rotation. That's something you feel a lot better.
And that's the thing too, because like I think we all know that we need so many bodies in the defensive line room, but how do the Bengals feel?
Here's a name I want to throw at you guys, though, real quick. It's a very unpopular name. He's popular amongst my company, TWSN, because we did an interview with him at the Senior Bowl a couple years ago. Marlon Davidson. He's a guy when he was coming out, man. He had a lot of hype. I look at those guys that are cast-offs or weren't used correctly. He was a part of a very bad Falcons defense for majority of his career there, and never quite found his footing, whether it be because he didn't get the play time that I thought he probably should have gotten. I saw him played on the edge at times, and I never felt like Marlon Davidson was an edge
Mhm.
rusher. I always felt like Marlon Davidson would be better as a 3-tech guy, to
Yeah.
be completely honest with you. I'm looking at him, a guy that's young, right? When we talk about young, I'm not even sure if Marlon Davidson's 26 years old yet.
25.
He's 25 years old. There's not too much film to necessarily analyze when it comes to the. I just can tell you from what I have seen from him, he's shown flashes. He has shown promise. So with that guy, right? Because you probably would rank him on the same tier as BJ Hill, maybe, in terms of when BJ Hill came to Cincinnati. It was like
Yeah,
BJ
when he
wasn't
came.
getting a lot of playing time. We didn't know what to expect from BJ Hill. BJ Hill shined in flashes when he did get opportunities. I know Marlon Davidson isn't the flashy name that people want to hear. But then you also look at guys like, Gallimore, who another guy who did not, live up to the expectation for whatever reason that might be. But those names are names that I'm thinking about. No, there's not a game wrecker in there necessarily, but you have to plan, you have to prepare for what if you're not able to land a Christian Wilkins? What if you're not able to land a Leonard Big Cat Williams? I mean, that would be a great get, right?
Yeah.
Sheldon Rankins has been out there for quite some time.
Yeah.
I'll be to tell you guys, the Bengals have never shown interest in him, so I just don't know if he's a guy that they would show interest in now. But those names really do pique my interest a little bit.
Yeah, and to kind of go along that avenue of thing, Ross Blacklock as well.
Yes.
That's another guy that, just from history, like we talked about a few weeks ago, the Bengals liked them in the draft. We know when these people hit free agency, the Bengals still kind of stick to their draft evaluations and they go after them. But it kind of just comes back to the question I just posed. I like the idea of taking some flyers on some of these high athletic guys, but whose roster spot are they taking at that point? Are they going to be able to cut some of these guys that we might want to cut? But do the Bengals want to cut them? So I think that's the line that's going to be interesting. I'm open for as many new faces in the defensive line room, specifically the defensive tackle room, as physically possible this season. But how do the Bengals in the building? How do they feel about Zach Carter?
Right.
How do they feel? Do they love BJ Hill? Is he a starter no matter what to them? There's so many questions that, like you talked about earlier, we might feel one thing, but they feel completely and totally different. So I think that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in the D-line room.
Yeah, I definitely think you made a great point, Malik, about these guys. I was looking at Marlon Davidson. I remember watching him out of college. The dude, I was like,
He went to UCF, right?
No, Auburn. I think Auburn. I might be wrong. But Marlon Davidson, he's played a full 3 years in the NFL. He hasn't played a single full season. His last contract was $940,000. He'll be making a couple million. So it's like, why not, right? Why not take a chance?
I would love Marlon Davidson in Cincinnati. To be honest with you.
Like his last contract was with the 49ers. He signed a $940,000 deal for 1 year. So it's like Marlon Davidson, you're getting that. That's a $2 million. Let's say that it's a flyer instead of like a guy that you already know what you're getting with Josh Dupo and these other guys in the defensive tackle room. So those are going to be the signings in free agency that aren't going to be sexy, but it's going to be like, okay, those are the ones that we want to see this season. And in the trenches, that's going to be huge for the defensive line.
Yeah, man. I think that we all have ways we feel like we can, fix the Bengals defense. And I think we're pretty much aligned on a lot of our thinking. I would love for them to make a splash. I just think if you're able to make a splash, it can make the world of difference. And I think that there are going to be opportunities for them to make a splash. I just wonder, are they going to be aggressive enough? And I think that's going to be the big question there, man. Are they going to be aggressive enough? Because, me and Joe Goodberry were talking a little bit today. Like, are they even going to, make a major attempt to bring a guy like DJ Reader back as well? Because again, we know there's times where the Bengals get very frugal with their money. And see what I did there, Evan?
I did.
Yeah.
I like this.
Somebody had to do it. Oh, kidding. But I think that this is just going to be an interesting time because I love T. Higgins, man. I love T. Higgins in Cincinnati, but I do think that you have to be practical. You do have to look at these investments you're making long term. I understand why the franchise tag he's a prime candidate for the franchise tag and why he's expected the franchise tag as well. But me and Evan we were chatting about this on the show last week, man. Can you just imagine what an extra $20 million could bring to this football team, man?
There's a lot of good players out there, man. And you want to talk about how the Chiefs defense has gone from what they have been as a bit of a joke is, as much as Steve Spagnuolo has done some crazy exotic stuff to try and find ways to generate pressure and keep that defense successful outside of Chris Jones. Adding a guy like L'Jarius Sneed, adding a guy like Drew Tranquil. These are the guys that they added. Adding a guy like Justin Reed. Justin Reed was not a $20 million, $16, $15, $12 million safety in free agency, but adding a lot of these key guys for $5, $7, $8, $9, $10 million a year, hitting on 3 guys like that does a lot for your depth, for your team, for where you're getting contributions. I mean, I'm probably missing other guys that they also
Charles
signed and brought in.
Charles
Charles Omenihu, yeah, like there's
so many of them.
Right. And so it'd be like that year when they went and they got Alex Kappa and Ted Karras and Von Bell. And suddenly it's like, yeah, the total number for those guys is like 23, 24 million. But what you get out of those 3 guys for your entire team is very worth it. So if you do, you know, I talked about going blue chip for a defensive tackle, like if you swap that out with the team money and then you have 30 million, 20 million left, like you can go get another 3 or 4 pretty good players that can help your depth out as well as the draft. Or you can go the other way, like we said, with, hey, instead of spending 23 million on Madubuike and Christian Wilkins, go get Leonard Williams and Sheldon Rankins and pay them 8 and 12. And there you go. You got the same amount, but you just filled 2 spots. And it's like, that might be more valuable for a team that really has not, I don't want to say they haven't done a good job of kind of replenishing the cupboard a little bit on the back end, but you can see the depth kind of wearing thin a little bit, where all these kind of projects are just kind of fizzling out at the same time, right? With the offensive line between Akeem Adeniji, Deontay Smith, like they've had to transition away from that in another way. And now they don't necessarily have the depth behind the offensive line that you'd like to. D-line the same way. Joseph Osai, remains to be seen what happened with him. Zach Carter has not been there. Like,
you were too nice.
I try to be fair, man. But like,
I will make a prediction. I do think Joseph Osai has a breakout year to his expectations. I think what it was the most sacks he's had in his career.
It was weird how little he was playing, man. I really worry that it's not another kind of Chris Evans type situation, which I don't think that it is. I haven't heard anything that would say that Joseph Osai is anything less than a good teammate and hard practicer or anything like that. I haven't heard anything about that.
3.5 sacks his rookie year.
But it was weird after seeing all this, all the run he got, and them talking about going into the year. He needs more preseason time. He needs to develop more.
He looks lost out there when he's out there. I think it's not a bad. It's just you need to play up to your expectations. You were the first pick in the 3rd round of your respected draft. I just think it's a thing where he hasn't broken through. When he's out there, he genuinely looks lost.
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes to, it's similar to Joe Burrow a little bit. I think Osai, his injuries have been really bad timing for him. He played well in the preseason, got hurt, missed a bunch of time. He gets hurt, missed a bunch of time. He's one of those guys that just needs to get out there and get run and get run and get run. And, you know, the times where he's had the opportunity to do so, he's looked good, but then something will happen and he can't get his groove, you know, and that's one of those things that might just be unfortunate. You know, maybe he'll find his groove elsewhere when that time comes in his career, but he seems like a guy that once he, you know, gets a position, he's going to get time to develop. He'll be fine. You know, maybe that might not be here. Maybe that'll be in a few years, but like he's shown flashes plenty, but he's one of those guys that really, truly just needs his reps, you know?
Yeah, I agree with I think you kind of said it beautifully there, man. He's a guy that you know, you still hold out hope for him. When, you know, I think that when I say breakout year for a guy like Osai, I'm expecting around six sacks this year for him.
Which would be awesome.
Which would be great. I mean, with a last place schedule, you know, you might get those opportunities, right? I certainly think that the Bengals are going to be beneficiaries of that last place schedule, but I never get too hung up on schedule type thing because the division is so hard, man. It's so difficult, man. The AFC North is just, it's rough, man, and you need to be able to finally break through that somehow, some way. So, I don't know. That's just my thoughts. Daniel, what say you?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of circle back real quick, this is the year, and if you're the front office, I understand you've got to be smart with your money. I completely understand that. But, man, like, just from a morale standpoint, just from how you've built the team, you're going to, like, it behooves you to not go all in this year. It really does. And going all in doesn't mean splurging like the Rams and going trading for a guy who's making 30 million, but maybe it means trading for a guy or signing a guy for 20 something million on the interior defensive line. When you look at And I'm going to make, not a bad scenario, but let's say the Bengals don't go all in and you don't win the Super Bowl this
Which
year.
is very possible.
You
Not
don't.
the not win the Super Bowl
Yeah.
part, but the not win all in.
Yeah.
Portion.
And if this is the prime, I know Joe Burrow is your prime for, how long your Super Bowl window is, but the team you have right now can win a Super Bowl. And who's to say that in 3 years you can't control that? So if I'm the Cincinnati Bengals, I'm putting all the chips on the table. I am going out there and I'm going to make a big splash and I'm going to put the best possible team. And there's going to be guys that you have the chance and you're going to have the cap space. You're going to have the opportunity. There's going to be trade targets. So if I'm the Cincinnati Bengals and I'm looking at the defense, how many more times are you going to have your defense coordinator, your coaches stay the same, have a great offensive line with 4 returning offensive linemen? This is your chance. The stars are aligning. It behooves you not to go all in this year. So
I'm in agreement with that. Very curious to see how everything shakes out. Guys, we've already reached the hour mark of the show. Next week's player spotlight, drop it down in the comment section who you guys want to see us spotlight. I'm feeling a little bit of juice, if you ask me. I'm feeling a little bit of Cam Taylor-Britt. Maybe I want to do a little bit of spotlight on him, but I'll let you guys dictate that. Remember, the player spotlight could be a player that is on the team or a player you'd like to potentially see on the team, but it's got to be a good one, right? It's got to be one that makes sense for us to obviously dissect and talk about it. Maybe it's Noah Fant. Who knows? I'll leave that up to you guys. But we want to thank you guys for tuning into another episode of State of the Jungle and spending your Valentine's Day with us. If you guys could do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content from the First Star Logistics Studio. Again, want to thank Lucky for watching State of the Jungle live in studio with us. Hopefully it was a blast for you, my man. Won't be the last time we do this, but until next time,